Hello, everybody. Welcome to Eliminating Silos in Scrum. How to avoid a major Agile failure. My name is Jeff Payne. For those of you that don't know me, I am the CEO and founder of Coveros. For the last 30 years, I've been building and testing software applications and helping teams and organizations do that as well. I've run a couple of software consulting companies during that period of time, and I do a lot of writing and speaking at conferences. I've testified in front of Congress and have spent lots of time with customers understanding what they want from software applications. I'm also the technical editor for Agile Connection, which is an online community of Agile and DevOps professionals, and we produce fresh content every week that help that community better understand Agile and DevOps. If you're interested, it is free to join Agile Connection. You can go to www.agileconnection.com to sign up. So for those not familiar with Coveros, I founded the company 14 years ago to help organizations accelerate the delivery of secure and reliable software. We provide consulting, coaching, and learning opportunities to a wide range of organizations, from startups to Fortune 100s, who are interested in modernizing their overall software development process. We've won some awards that I'm very proud of. We were listed as one of the top 10 Agile consulting companies several years ago. We have won hot ticket awards for our open source products that we've built and support. And we've been listed as one of the fastest growing private companies here in the US. A little bit about what we provide as a company. So we have really two fundamental lines of consulting, coaching, and training businesses. The first is our consulting services, where we provide a combination of software process improvement and hands-on implementation and automation in the areas of Agile software development, Agile testing and automation, application security, and DevOps/DevSecOps engineering. If you're looking to modernize your software development process, or you need help on a particular product you're building and you want us to help you teach your people how to do it better, that's our sweet spot at Coveros. We also have immersive learning capabilities. We have 50+ hands-on training classes across Agile, DevOps, DevSecOps, test automation, application security that we teach both publicly and privately to organizations and individuals that are interested in improving their skills. What differentiates our training is that we reinforce what you learn in the classroom with coaching, where we take what was learned, go back with you to your particular projects, and apply what was learned while helping you do it the right way. We find that coupling training and coaching is a great way to make sure that the concepts you learn in training, you learn how to apply in your situation. We also have quite a few community support activities that we provide to the software community. We run 4 conferences under our TechWell brand: Star East, Star West, Agile plus DevOps West, Agile plus DevOps East each year. Star East and Star West are software testing conferences. They just celebrated their 30th year of being around and available to the community. And Agile plus DevOps conferences obviously focus on Agile and DevOps in terms of helping people learn how to move toward those capabilities. I mentioned Agile Connection as one of our software communities. We also have Sticky Minds, which is our software testing community. And we also have a new community called the TechWell Hub that encompasses testing, Agile, DevOps, leadership, application security, pretty much any modern software development topic that you want to talk about, you can talk about on the hub. We have over 8,000 members in the hub who share their knowledge, their information, they ask questions, they highlight upcoming events. It's a great place to share and learn more about software. So I'm going to be talking about what I call Scrum or Fall today, which is something in Agile that doesn't work very well. And just as a backdrop for where the content in this presentation comes from, we have been assessing organizations for over 10 years, helping them identify the gaps and areas where they need to improve to make their software development process better. We do this at both the team and enterprise level. We've done well over 200 of these assessments over the years. And we have models in our assessment approach for assessing agility, your DevOps / continuous integration, continuous delivery capabilities, your testing process and automation, and your application security to improve each of those areas individually or in combination. Our assessment approach results in a score for each of 6 different areas where we rank you from 0 to 5 in terms of your maturity. This allows us to figure out where the gaps and information and places where your organization needs to improve. And we have the ability to benchmark your scores and your results against others in your industry that we've assessed, so you can see whether you're ahead or behind your competition. The 6 areas that we look at when assessing an organization include how involved is the customer in what you do, how is your organization structured, and what a pattern does your culture fit into in terms of its, approach? What's the quality and the quality attributes that you measure and that you test for and that you build in? And what value do you provide to the customers? How do you manage projects? How do you make teams more self-directed? How do you provide guide rails and guardrails to make sure that things are done within your strategic approach? How do you approach engineering? How do you design? How do you develop? How do you test? How do you deliver? And how do you automate those practices to make them more efficient? And last but not least, how healthy are your teams? Is there fear of failure? Do they have psychological safety? Do they experiment? Do they work well together? These are all aspects of a good, sound, modern software development process that we assess. And you get a series of scores, as mentioned, that you can use to determine where you're at and also set goals for where you want to get to. Now let's get into the meat of the discussion. Today, we're going to be talking about avoiding what I call Scrum or Fall. All right, many organizations adopt Scrum as their approach to putting Agile capabilities, principles, and practices in place. But they often forget to change the way software is designed, developed, tested, and delivered while implementing Scrum. You see, Scrum itself provides capabilities for managing your work, right? Defining requirements as user stories, prioritizing and estimating those stories, maintaining those in backlogs, plus a series of ceremonies that make sure that you are planning things properly, you are keeping in sync and keeping up to date with what the rest of the team is doing. You're identifying areas where there's blockers or hurdles that need to be moved out of the way, and you're reviewing with customers progress you've made, getting their approval, And then retroing, AKA looking at what you've done and trying to improve your process. But if we don't change the way fundamentally we design, we develop, we test, and we deliver inside of our sprints, we're going to end up in what I call Scrum or fall. Now, there's different aspects or types of Scrum or fall, and I'm going to talk about some of these, and maybe you'll see one that fits what you do at your company right now. The first one I call Scrum or Fall Classic. All right. This is where an organization is using Scrum. They have sprints, but inside those sprints, we still have a little mini waterfall happening. We first design, then we develop, then we test. So the handoffs are still there between the different silos and groups that are part of our sprint and part of our scrums. We're just trying to do those handoffs really fast because we have to do this entire series of things in, let's say, 2 weeks, if we have 2-week sprints. Scrum or Fall Classic often emerges when the business side of your organization has decided to move to Agile. They want the benefits of Agile in terms of transparency and control over when things are delivered. But the development team isn't engaged and doesn't really know how to do these activities described here differently. If you fall under Scrum or Fall Classic, what you'll see happen over time is one of two things. Either your sprints will get longer, so the organization will say, we're not able to deliver working software in 2 weeks, so let's make our sprints 3 weeks. Let's make them 4 weeks. Let's make them 6 weeks. I've actually seen organizations who took that to the point where they had 12-week sprints. When I see this kind of elongation of sprints, I always laugh and say, well, why don't you just have one sprint that's a year long and we'll call it a day? My point, of course, is what you're doing when you're elongating your sprints is just moving back to a waterfall process. And that's not helping you put value in front of customers quicker and getting feedback from customers so you can make sure you don't waste time and effort by doing the wrong thing. The other thing that may happen is that testing just doesn't get done. So what gets delivered in the sprint is not working software. And if that's not corrected downstream, that could end up with quality issues being a problem in production. The second Scrum or Fall type that I see is what I call version 2.0. And sometimes this is an outgrowth of Scrum or Fall Classic. Organizations don't want to elongate their sprints, but they realize that they can't get all their testing done in sprints. And so they will lay something out like you see here. And I've gone into organizations where they proudly showed me this design and said, isn't this great? We figured out how to make Agile work. In sprint 1, we design. In sprint 2, we design the next thing while we develop the first thing. Sprint 3, we design the third thing while we develop the second thing while we test the first thing. And on we go. So we've shifted testing and we've shifted design to other sprints. We've effectively gone back to more of a waterfall process. Once again, we've elongated the delivery of working software. In this model, we don't see working software until the third sprint. So if these sprints are 2 weeks, that's 6 weeks. If they're 3 weeks, that's 9 weeks. If there's 4 weeks, that's 12 weeks. We're right back to a waterfall type of a process. Never mind that there's a very dangerous disconnect. If testing finds a problem in sprint 3 that is due to a requirements or a design issue that was done in sprint 1, we have to go back and track that down and find the developers to get that fixed. And that's a dangerous disconnect because the developers are on to something else and they may not have the time. They may not remember or have to dig back in and figure out what happened in something they implemented at least a couple of sprints ago. And that means waste. That means inefficiency. That means problems. The third one I call Scrum or Fall Federal. This is a special, unique Scrum or Fall for our friends in government. And it occurs typically when an organization formally separates planning and design from development to independent testing in their process. And so you often see these three boxes. Looks a lot like waterfall, doesn't it? Obviously, there's significant rework and waste here as we're planning everything up front, which is what we don't want to do in Agile. The whole idea of Agile is to not overplan up front, but plan iteratively as we go, because we learn as we go, things change and adjust as we go. And as I say all the time, customers don't know what they want until they see it. And so we want a very short process between when we define a requirement and that requirement is implemented, tested, and shown to the customer so they can tell us whether we're going in the right direction or not. In addition, studies show that up to half of the requirements that we plan up front in a waterfall process never get implemented because things change. And so we're wasting 50% of that planning and design work when we operate in this manner. Now, notice and recognize that the reason why often Scrum or Fall Federal exists is because of the way we let contracts in the government. There is often a team responsible for supporting the government and a contract around planning and design, contract types of activities, onboarding. There's a contract for development in sprints, and that may or may not include testing. And then there's a contract for independent verification and validation, the checking of what's been tested to make sure it works properly. Because these are three separate contracts with three separate sets of people, three separate organizations, they often don't work together in a cross-functional way. And quite honestly, sometimes they're competitors and don't want to work together or share what they're doing in their particular phase. Now, in the commercial world, you'll see this too, not usually driven by contracts as much as perhaps driven by not being able to get testing done in your sprints. And so you'll sometimes hear some sprints defined as or called hardening sprints. That's a code word for I'm doing testing in this sprint of everything I didn't get around to testing when I should have in my other sprints. Now, the last one I call Scrum or Fall Next Gen. And I actually saw an organization who pitched this as their Agile process. They got up at a whiteboard and they said, here's our Agile process. In sprint 1, we design the software. In sprint 2, we develop the software. And in sprint 3, we test the software. So obviously, this is so not Agile that I can't even comment on it. I was flabbergasted that somebody considered this to be Agile because it's not Agile in its structure at all. So the question really is, okay, I see myself in one of those types of Scrum or Fall. What do I do? How do I get out of Scrum or Fall? And how do I do it better? Now, there's no one perfect graphic that describes how a sprint process works inside of the sprint. But I think this is a pretty good representation of the flow of activities in a sprint if you're doing things properly. Now, on the left, you'll see user stories coming into our sprints, right? These should be prioritized, and we should have determined which of those things are things we believe we can implement and test effectively in the sprint, and they come into a sprint. Coming out of the sprint comes either, we may call it working software or working code, or releasable code. And we'll talk about the difference of that of working versus releasable in a future slide. But just think of this as something that's been tested to some level that I know works. Inside of our sprint, it should work like this. First of all, I'm a big fan of everybody being involved in the design and the planning and design process, meaning we all need to be at kickoff. Everybody on the cross-functional team, developers, testers, business analysts, obviously those associated with the product side, the product owner, Scrum master, right? Business UI UX. You know, if you're trying to continuously deliver, you've got to get your DevOps folks in there, your release folks, your operational support folks need to be part of this cross-functional discussion and planning. Team-based design should be done. We should be looking at the stories that are coming in, figuring out how those stories and what we're going to implement in our sprint is going to change what our design looks like at the end of this sprint. And we should think all that through as a team so we understand what we're building and what we're testing. We should also be working to create acceptance criteria, right? This is criteria that determines whether particular user stories meet the customer's needs. We'll talk about this a little bit when we talk about behavioral driven development in a minute. Our acceptance criteria drives the creation of acceptance tests we can use to verify that a user story works properly. And both our design and our acceptance tests should feed into the implementation, the unit testing, and the refactoring that we're going to ask our developers and testers to do. Out of these things come higher level testing of specific user stories and the integration of those user stories into our current design through integration and exploratory testing. And of course, as we find issues and challenges, either with the tests or with how we build it and we tested it from a unit perspective, we feed that back into the process. When everything's good to go, we declare victory as we have now working software, working code, or releasable code. So in this model, the first to do is to encourage team-based activities. And I already alluded to this. All right, we should be restructuring our activities so we are designing, building, testing as a team, full team. All right, and the first way you do that effectively, and a great way to break down silos, is to use behavioral driven development techniques, BDD, so that for every user story, we are aligning the business, so either a business analyst or the product owner, a developer who's going to implement that story, and a tester who's going to test that story. And they should be working together up front to make sure that all three of those people, we call them the three amigos, the business, dev, and test, are on the same page about what this user story means. And they should be creating the acceptance criteria such that they're all in agreement what tests, what criteria has to be met so that this user story meets the needs of our customer. All right. The next thing you need to do from a team-based perspective is what I call whole team quality. And all this means is that we need to state that no one is done until everyone is done. And what that means is that if I'm a developer or I'm a business analyst and I've thought through the story and I've implemented the story and I've tested it to some level, and now I'm the test team is integrating and testing it further, I don't say, yep, see ya, I'm done. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm out of here. My job is finished. That's not whole team quality. Just like we are asking testers to work up front on design activities, on creating acceptance tests that get built ideally before the code is even written, so the developers can test what they're building against the acceptance criteria. We need to support the testers and help them do the integration and exploratory testing that needs to be done to be finished. So everybody starts and finishes together. The second thing we need to do to avoid scrum or fall is to quantify success and hold everybody to that success. So you've all probably heard of this idea of definition of done, right? This is really a quantifiable definition of when a story is finished and a sprint is finished, right? What are the things that we're going to declare victory around? And the word quantifiable is in here for a reason. And that is that a lot of times what I see in a definition of done that doesn't work very well is qualified or qualified types of information, quality oriented, but very fuzzy and non-quantifiable, that is gray. It's hard to tell whether you passed or failed. And whenever you are in that situation and time is of the essence and you're near the end of the sprint, your first inclination is to say, well, it's good enough. Yeah, it's close enough. Yeah, that meets the definition. If I look sideways and off to the side, let's declare victory. And over time, that will slide you away from working software, releasable software. And you'll start to introduce or send bugs down toward production. The second thing you want to do is start moving your definition of done toward it meaning releasable code versus just working code. If you're trying to move to a continuous delivery environment where every change or every small batch of changes may be coming out of a sprint, you want to be able to deploy into production, maybe not every sprint, but when you need to, right? You need to start adjusting your definition of done so that it not just means the code's been tested to some level, but the code has gone through the entire testing process and any other associated activities that need to be done, such that if the business said, I want that deployed today, you can press a button and deploy it. That's releasable code. And you're going to need, obviously, to change the definition of done and strengthen it in order to put yourself in that position. The third thing you want is quality gates, as I call them. And that just means that as I move my code from the development environment to a quality assurance or testing environment, to a staging or pre-production or acceptance environment, to whatever those series of test environments are that you have in your process, that for each one of those, we have a definition of success. How good does the test results have to be for us to say, yep, this is something I can move toward production? And I want those integrated in and part of my process so that they're automatically done as I check code in and it moves through my continuous integration and delivery process. The next thing you want to do is pair up developers and testers. And I mentioned this when I talked about BDD, but there's more to it than BDD. If you want to break down silos between your developers and your testers, and one of the root causes of Agile project failure that I've seen is the fact that developers and testers are still kind of in their silos and they haven't figured out how to work together. The best way I found is to pair them, right? There's lots of things developers and testers can do together day to day in sprints. Okay, the first is create story acceptance tests up front. As I mentioned, once we've defined our acceptance criteria for a given user story, we can write a set of tests that check whether that acceptance criteria is met or not. They need to be both positive and negative, but my view is they should be built before the code is written. And they should be built by the developer and the tester, and probably the business analyst, to make sure that we fully understand. There's no better way to test the user story itself and its acceptance criteria than to try to write tests. Acceptance tests are part of specification in Agile. It's the how are we going to implement this and what is the criteria for success. So we want to create those up front. We want to give those to the developer. And they don't need to be automated. If they are, that's great. But they need to have those. So as they implement software, they can check and verify whether what they're building meets the acceptance criteria. So that should be done together. Two is they should test and check each other's tests for completeness. Developers are great at implementing things. Testers are great at testing things. Let's combine that expertise and make them better at the whole process. So for instance, a developer oftentimes doesn't have professional testing experience. So they'll know how to use a unit testing framework, write a happy path unit test that verifies the functionality of something they're implementing. But they may or may not be thinking about all the different testing techniques and types that are going to make sure that the edge cases are tested and work properly. Are they doing boundary value testing? Are they looking at equivalence classes? Are they creating negative tests? Are they checking that every error condition that's possible is validated and verified to return the right information and do the right thing? Sitting together, a pair of developers and testers can focus on the unit tests that are being completed, and the tester can help the developer learn to be a better tester. Other way around, the developer is going to understand a lot more about the design and how the user stories that are being implemented fit into that design, and what other stories or capabilities are integrated with that design. They can help review and improve any integration or just even higher level user story tests that the tester is building to make sure everything works together. They should actually pair program together, right? One way to find out whether we really do understand the acceptance criteria in the user story is sit down together at one terminal, let the developer do their thing, but let the developer or have the developer give a running dialogue of what they're doing. Now I'm adding the code for this particular feature that gets implemented with this method. And here's how it works and what it does. Here's what it takes as input. Here's what it results in. Just hearing that dialogue based on understanding the user story and the acceptance criteria, the tester's going to pick out some things that don't sound right. Or they say, wait a second, I thought this was the return, or I thought the input also included this. We're going to make the code better by pairing together. And last but not least, we should pair tests together. So get together and do some integration testing, do some exploratory testing, work together to explore the product and figure out how to make it better. So some additional resources that you can use to help you. I mentioned the TechWell Hub Slack workspace that we have at Coveros. You can join at hub.techwell.com if you're interested in more information on anything to do with a modern software development process. Please join us at the Hub. To wrap up things, let me summarize what we've talked about today. Scrum or Fall is an anti-pattern for Agile development. When you fall into the trap of following a Scrum or Fall process, you get away from key Agile principles that are critical to Agile being successful in your organization. It will elongate the time between when you come up with the requirement or specify what needs to be built and when that capability is fully tested and approved by the user. And the longer that process goes, the more likely it is that you've wasted time and effort. So we want to keep our feedback cycles with our customers very small. And that means we need to keep our sprints small. And that means we need to figure out how to effectively design, develop, and test together as a cross-functional team, or we're going to introduce waste. Second is, if you have Scrum or Fall in certain situations, that will lead to testing not being fully done, not meeting our definition of done, not coming out of sprints with working software, not coming out of sprints with releasable software. And all those things violate some of the Agile principles, because our whole goal in Agile is to make sure that iteration over iteration, sprint over sprint, we are delivering quality and something that works, so that we have the flexibility to release it whenever, from a business perspective, we feel we have something releasable. The other thing that allows us to do is address and deal with urgent needs, zero-day vulnerabilities that are discovered out there that our software has in production, critical defects that make our software go down and make it unavailable to our customers in production. Those things are all solved by solving your Scrum or Fall challenges. And I hope you go ahead and apply some of what I talked about today to make your software better. If you have any questions for me, you want to talk about this particular aspect more, or you want to talk about what some of the other anti-patterns are that we've discovered at Coveros while helping people improve their software development process, please do feel free to reach out to me. And Twitter, I'm at Jeffrey E. Payne. I tweet a lot on Agile, DevOps, test automation, application security, the integration of all those things. So please follow me on Twitter, or you can just reach out to me on email at jeff.payne@coveros.com. If you have any needs, you're trying to improve your software development, test, delivery process, or just have some questions you want to ask about any of those areas, please do feel free to reach out, as I'm happy to help you or talk about some of the other findings in the assessments that we do. So with that, I thank you all for attending this session, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.